Hey everyone, it's Adam, and today I want to make another video talking about one of those timeless truths, and that is why abortion is unethical. And the reason I want to do this is so that you can have a resource in your pocket to explain to others or to share with others going through the reasons why it's unethical. And the way we're going to do this is actually by looking at the bad arguments for abortion. So we're going to look at what arguments people have to promote or propagate abortion, and why each of those are wrong, why they do not have a leg to stand on, why they're ultimately grounded on sinking sand. As we start this, I think it's important that we have the definition of abortion right. And so the definition of abortion is the deliberate termination of a human pregnancy, the deliberate or willful choice to terminate or kill a human being inside of the womb. The reason I say kill is because we learned in our last video that life during pregnancy begins at the moment of conception. So to terminate a human pregnancy is to end the life of a conceived human being, to kill them. And if you look at the definition of abortion next to the definition of murder, they share very, very similar terminology. The definition of murder is the premeditated killing of one human being by another. So you have the deliberate termination of a human pregnancy and the premeditated killing of a human being. Those are almost the exact same definitions. It's just that abortion is the killing of a human being inside of the womb, and murder is the killing of a human being outside of the womb. So the nature of abortion is not a secret. It is murder, plain and simple. And so as we're going through each of these arguments for abortion, it's important for us to remember that these are individuals who are arguing why they should be able to murder their babies inside of the womb, or why that other people should have the right to murder their babies inside of the womb. It's not inflammatory language, it's the simple definitions of what it is. So let's get into our bad arguments for abortion. First, there's some scientific articles. Again, we learned last week that the science behind life beginning is unequivocally that it begins at conception. That from the moment a sperm and egg fuse together and create a single-celled human embryo, that is new life, a new, unique human being is created. But one of the biggest scientific, I call it, arguments for abortion is that it's not a baby, it's just a clump of cells. Well, again, when you look at the science says that that clump of cells, so to speak, is alive, is unique, has the genetic makeup of a new person, is going to be self-regulating and self-sustaining and self-reproducing those cells within its system, and it is a human being. To say it's a clump of cells, you just have to ask the question, what type of cells? And it's human cells. Me right now, you watching this video, you're just a clump of cells, but you are a human being made up of those cells. All the argument is one has less cells and one has more cells, but regardless, they're human cells, they're alive, and it is ultimately a human being. So the next scientific argument is that those clump of cells inside the womb is not viable on its own. It's dependent on the mother, and therefore we can kill it. Well, here's the problem with that argument. My infant child is dependent on his parents. I don't think anyone watching this video, pro-abortion or not, would say I have the right to terminate the life of my child because it's dependent on us as parents. And even going into everyone as human beings, we're all dependent on other people, on our environments, on our surroundings, on what we have to eat and drink and shelter ourselves. And so everyone is dependent all the time on other people and other surroundings. The argument of the baby isn't viable, it's inside of the womb, none of us are viable. If we went out into outer space without a spacesuit, we would die, because we are not viable on our own. We're viable in the environment that we live in. And for me as a Christian, the environment that God created us to live in. And so once again, you take that argument back to a baby inside the womb. It is viable inside of the womb, inside of the environment that God created it to live in. So that, again, that argument falls because no one is viable on their own. unless they're in the appropriate environment that God intended. And then finally, the last scientific argument, going back to definitions and semantics, is that it's a fetus, not a baby. The reason you can kill what's in your womb, the reason you can terminate the life, the reason you can abort that child is because it's not a baby, it's not a child, it's a fetus. All this is, like I said, is semantics. It's just the changing of words to try to make up an argument really quickly. The Latin fetus is the Latin word for offspring. It's just the root word where we get the word for offspring, or really baby. A fetus is an offspring, and a human fetus is a human offspring. It's a human being. It is a baby. It is a child. Again, that goes back to the science of these arguments that new life begins at the moment of conception. Now, we may define different stages of pregnancy as the embryonic stage or the fetal stage, but that doesn't change the nature of that pregnancy, or really of that child developing for the duration of that pregnancy. At all times, the being growing inside of a mother's womb is a human being that is a human baby. And so once again, this argument falls flat. So there's our scientific bad arguments. No, it is not just a clump of cells. It is a living human being. Yes, it is not viable outside of the mother, but none of us are viable outside of our controlled environments that we've been created to live in. And no, it is not a fetus, as if that is some ethereal, non-living category that we can just end the life of. It is a baby. From conception through birth, it is a human being. Let's get into our next category of arguments, and this has to do with women's rights. A lot of times you will hear that it is a woman's right to choose to abort their child. And a lot of times you'll hear that because I'm a man, I can't speak in to this issue. If I don't have a womb, if I don't have a uterus, I have no opinion. Well, let's start with that argument then. Abortion is not a women's rights issue, it's a human rights issue. The big issue with abortion is not that it has anything to do with the woman's rights. It has to do with that baby's rights inside of the womb. That baby, that living human being, has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those inalienable rights that not only God gives us, but also are protected in our Constitution. And so to say I don't have a uterus and so I can't have an opinion would be like going back to the darkest time of our nation and saying, if you don't own slaves, you can't have an opinion on slavery. Or going back to Nazi Germany and saying, if you are not a German, you can't have an opinion on the Holocaust. Those arguments are ridiculous and ludicrous and diminish the fact that every individual is made in the image of God. And so when other individuals or entire classes of individuals are being subjugated to slaughter or slavery or oppression, that it is the duty of every human being to stand up and speak out against that terrible injustice. So the fact that I'm a human being is enough reason for me to stand up for this human rights issue against abortion. Another way this argument for abortion will be construed as women's rights has to do with my body, my choice. That is a mantra within the pro-abortion or pro-choice side of the argument. It's the woman's body, so it's her choice. Well, again, that's just scientifically, biologically wrong. It's a different body. It's a new body. It's a unique, genetic, living organism growing inside of your body. It is, again, inside your body. It's inside your womb, but it's not your body. It's a different body. It's not yours. And so the choice that a woman has in the matter is whether or not to get pregnant, not whether or not to end the life of that pregnancy. A choice was made whether to have unprotected sex or have sex outside of marriage. They chose to get pregnant in one way or another, whether on purpose or not. And now this is a consequence, a good consequence, a baby of that choice. And that baby is now worthy of life, worthy of protection, because it is its own human being, albeit growing inside of the mother. And you may be asking the question already of what about women who don't have a choice, cases of rape or incest? We will get to those a little later. Finally, the last argument for abortion is that abortion is health care within this category of women's rights. It's health care. You're taking away our health care, they might say at a women's or pro-abortion march. Abortion is not health care. Abortion is murder. We looked at those definitions. The deliberate termination of a human being inside the womb. The deliberate, premeditated, willful choice to kill an existing human being who is inside the womb. That's not healthcare. That's not healthcare. That is death. That is murder. And so it's just completely incompatible with the claim that abortion is healthcare. Another more unique argument that I've heard only recently is that abortion can sometimes be what's best for the children. And if you've never heard that before, let me explain how it was explained to me. Sometimes the arguments I've heard for abortion have to do with kids are living in poverty, or there's so many kids in the foster care system, or the kids don't have enough food on the table or live in abusive homes, and therefore abortion should be legal. And if you just fast forward that argument a little bit to the one they're making of, it's so tragic that kids are in foster care, that kids are abusive homes, that kids don't have food and clothing like they need. Yes, it's tragic, but they're saying the solution is to just kill those children. And what kind of solution is that? They're making the choice that rather than this child go through suffering, we will just take the life of that child so they don't have to experience. Where's the children's choice in that matter? They didn't get to make a choice. That choice was taken from them. And yes, kids go through horrible things, and we should work to end those things. We should work to end poverty. We should work to get children out of abusive homes. We should work to adopt children who do not have parents. But to say that the best solution for those children is to kill them is nonsensical. It's absolutely ludicrous and insane. It is absolutely not what's best for those children. Finally, let's get to some of the medical exceptions. I said we would hit on rape and incest, and this will be our last category is medical exceptions. And so a lot of times rape and incest is seen as a medical exception. That what about children who are conceived, women who did not have a choice through rape and or incest to get pregnant? Let me start by saying rape is horrid. It is abhorrent. It is evil. It is a tragic thing that can happen to individuals that should never happen. It is not part of God's good order. And same with incest. Incest, whether consensual or not, is not part of God's good order. We know that incest creates a host of problems genetically, mentally, physically for children who are conceived in this way. But again, this sort of goes back to the children are in poverty, or children don't have that nurturing environment around them. The answer can't just be to kill it. Yes, we know that a child conceived out of incest is going to have potentially and probably a host of problems, genetically, mentally, etc. But that's advocating for eugenics. It's advocating for we should kill children who are insufficient or deficient developmentally, whether mental or physical. That is eugenics. And that is actually, if for a later video, what the founder of Planned Parenthood advocated for was eugenics, was the killing of children who are deficient mentally or physically. And so there has to be a recognition that yes, while incest is wrong before God, and while it causes a host of problems for children, the solution cannot be to kill those children. Those children are still made in the image of God. And again, fast forward that argument. Children or human beings, further developed adults who have physical limitations or mental limitations, what have you, they're made in the image of God. They're worthy of life. They're worthy of protecting. And to go back to rape is horrible. It's wrong. But why would you punish the child and not the rapist? Why would you kill the child and not rather lock up that rapist, rather make it near impossible for that rapist to see the light of day again outside of a prison? Why would you punish and kill the child for the sins of its father? And again, to the answer, or to the argument of, well, it's so traumatic for that woman. It's so traumatic. Every time that she sees that baby growing up or is carrying that baby, she's going to think about her rapist. Aborting a child is just as traumatic. It's one of the most traumatic things you can do. And there is testimony upon testimony upon testimony of women who abort their children and deeply regret it. And there's also testimony and testimony of women who are rape victims, who have their child and bring it to term and love their child and are blessed by their child and are thankful for their child. And they are able to separate the means in which that child was created from the child itself. It's not that child's fault that its biological father, in this case, did a horrible, horrible thing. And a woman shouldn't go through more trauma of killing her own child than she's already had to go through of that rape. And so I'll link a couple of testimonials to this video so that you can see for yourself the statistics of women who regret abortions and rape victims who have carried a child to term. The last argument is medically necessary abortion, that women are going to die if we don't have abortion. First of all, that argument is very inflammatory. It's making you choose between the mother and the child. Women are going to die if we don't let babies be killed. That is a logical fallacy, and that is not a valid argument, because it's just supposed to get your emotions going, that you don't want women to die, do you? Well, then we have to kill babies. There's no sense of, we don't want babies to die and we don't want women to die, and so we should have the best solution for both of these outcomes. And so those arguments are rarely ever well-meaning or actually concerned about true medical exceptions, and rather a ploy, a fear-mongering tactic to keep abortion rights legal at any duration of pregnancy. And let me give you an example of that. One of the previous videos that I'd encourage you to watch is what is Amendment 3 in Missouri. And Amendment 3 talks about if there's any medical reason, physically or mentally, that would affect the mother during pregnancy, she can terminate her child up to term. If there's any physical or mental medical reason that mother has a concern, she can terminate her child. That is so subjective. That is not language of medically necessary. That is language of, if it's inconvenient, we can call it medically necessary. That is not, this mother is going to die. That is, this mother doesn't want her baby, and so she should be allowed to kill it. There are true medical exceptions that we will talk about in a future video. We'll talk about things like ectopic pregnancies. We'll talk about things like the mother has a 90% chance of dying and the child has a 1% chance of surviving. Those are tough ethical questions that we'll talk about. But for the sake of this video, we're focusing on bad arguments. And it's a bad argument to pit the life of the mother against the life of the child, because most times that is not the case. Most times it's just inflammatory tactics to keep abortion for any reason at any stage of pregnancy legal, such as Amendment 3 in Missouri. So we have covered the scientific bad arguments for abortion, the women's rights bad arguments for abortion, the what's best for the children arguments for abortion, and the medical exceptions of arguments for abortion. And again, what I want you to remember when you hear these arguments is people are arguing why they should have the right to murder their child inside of the womb. That should drastically shift people from arguing for the right to kill their babies to advocating to protect those babies at all costs, because they are a life created by God with dignity and value that deserve the same inalienable rights that we have of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thank you for watching.